I trusted two people more than anyone in this world, my best friend and my cousin, and I believed the secret we shared would die with us. But secrets don't die, they rot. And when they finally surface, they don't just destroy trust, they force you to choose who you lose forever. I used to believe loyalty was something you earned once and then owned forever, like blood, like childhood, like the kind of bond that forms when two people know the ugliest parts of you and stay anyway. That was how I felt about Lena, my best friend since we were 14, and Marcus, my cousin who grew up more like a brother. The three of us were stitched together by history, holidays, inside jokes, and one terrible secret that changed the shape of all our lives. Back then, I didn't see it as terrible. I told myself it was complicated, necessary, something we would carry quietly and responsibly, like adults. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about how secrets behave when they're shared by people with different motives. Lena came into my life the summer my mother got sick. I was awkward, guarded, angry at the world, and she had this way of sitting beside pain without trying to fix it. She didn't flinch when I cried. She didn't tell me to be strong. She just stayed. That kind of staying creates loyalty faster than laughter ever could. By the time we graduated high school, we were inseparable. We shared clothes, dreams, mistakes. We promised each other we'd never lie, even when the truth hurt. Marcus was family in the way only cousins who grow up under the same roof can be. His mother worked nights, so he ate dinner at our table more often than his own. We fought like siblings and defended each other like soldiers. If Marcus needed help, you showed up. That was the rule. Blood wasn't just thicker than water. It was obligation, protection, silence. The secret happened years later when life had already softened us with disappointment. I won't dress it up. It started as a mistake layered on top of exhaustion and grief. Marcus was struggling, financially, emotionally, spiritually. His marriage was cracking in quiet, humiliating ways. Lena was newly divorced, raw and lonely, pretending she was fine because that's what strong women do. I was the bridge between them, the one who invited them both to my apartment for Sunday dinners, who believed love multiplied instead of dividing. The night everything crossed a line, I wasn't in the room. That detail used to haunt me. Now I understand it saved me from something worse. When Marcus came to me weeks later, his face gray with panic, he didn't say her name at first. He just said, "I messed up and I need you." Those words still echo in my chest. I remember sitting on my couch, knees pulled to my chest, listening as he confessed that he and Lena had slept together once. Once, he said, like it was a minor accident, like a broken glass. He swore it was over. He swore it meant nothing. He swore he loved his wife and would fix things. I should have told him to come clean. I should have told Lena I knew. I should have walked away from both of them. But loyalty is a dangerous thing when it's blind. I saw Marcus shaking. I saw my cousin, the boy who shared his fries with me when we were kids, begging me not to let his life collapse. And when Lena came to me later, eyes red, voice trembling, saying it was a mistake she'd regret forever, I believed her too. That was the moment the secret stopped belonging to them and started poisoning me. We agreed to silence, a shared vow that felt responsible at the time. Protect the marriage, protect the friendship, protect the family. I told myself I was choosing the lesser evil. I told myself truth wasn't always mercy. What I didn't understand was that silence doesn't protect relationships. It rearranges the power inside them. At first, nothing changed on the surface. We still met for birthdays, we still laughed, but underneath, the air was different. Conversations felt staged, smiles came half a second too late. Lena avoided my eyes when Marcus was around. Marcus overcompensated with kindness that felt performative, and I carried the weight of watching two people I loved pretend nothing was wrong while I swallowed the truth every single day. The first crack came when Marcus's wife announced she was pregnant. I remember the room spinning slightly, the sound of my own heartbeat drowning out the congratulations. Lena froze, just for a second, but I saw it, and she knew I saw it. That look passed between us like a blade. In that moment, I realized the secret wasn't done with us. It was just waiting for better timing. After that, Lena changed. She became distant, sharp-edged, easily offended. When I asked what was wrong, she accused me of judging her. When I reassured her, she accused me of pity. Our once easy friendship turned tense, like walking through a room filled with fragile glass. Meanwhile, Marcus leaned on me more than ever. Late-night calls, emotional confessions, gratitude that felt heavy, transactional. He reminded me often that I was the only one who understood, the only one he trusted. That's when it dawned on me, loyalty was no longer mutual. It had become leverage. The day everything began to unravel wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no tears, just a quiet conversation that landed like an earthquake. Lena sat across from me at a cafe, stirring her coffee until it went cold. She didn't look up when she said, "I can't live like this anymore." I thought she meant the guilt. I thought she meant the silence. I was already forming words about honesty and consequences when she finally met my eyes and said something that changed the shape of my heart forever. She said, "I need you to back me, no matter what happens next." There was something calculated in her voice, something rehearsed. I asked her what she meant, and she leaned in, lowering her voice like the walls were listening. She told me Marcus had promised her things he never intended to keep. She told me she felt used, discarded, and then she told me she was done protecting him. I asked her what she planned to do. She said, "Tell the truth, but not all of it." That was the moment I understood that loyalty had reached its breaking point, because what she was asking wasn't support, it was participation in a betrayal that would destroy a family and rewrite history in her favor. And she expected me to choose her simply because we'd been friends longer. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every promise, every silence. I realized that the secret we shared had become a weapon, and both of them were waiting to see which way I'd point it. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever choice I made next would cost me someone I loved, and there was no version of this story where I walked away untouched. I didn't answer Lena right away. I told her I needed time, which felt like the most honest thing I could offer without choosing a side. She nodded, but her jaw tightened, and I recognized that look from years of friendship. It was the look she wore when she'd already decided how things should go and was bracing herself for resistance. When we hugged goodbye, her arms felt stiff, like she was holding on to me out of habit rather than trust. As I walked to my car, I had the unsettling realization that whatever loyalty once meant to us, it was already slipping through our fingers. That night, Marcus called. He always seemed to know when Lena and I had talked, even though neither of us told him. His voice was strained, trying too hard to sound casual. He asked how I was doing, whether Lena seemed okay, whether she'd said anything strange. I could hear the fear beneath his questions, the kind that makes people say careless things. I told him she was struggling, that the weight of everything was catching up to her. He sighed, long and shaky, and then he did something I hadn't expected. He reminded me of everything we'd been through as family, how I'd always been there for him, how this secret, this silence, proved how strong our bond was. "You wouldn't let her ruin everything," he said quietly. "Not after all this." I hung up, feeling sick. It was clear now. Both of them were pulling on me from opposite ends, each convinced that loyalty meant protecting them at the expense of the other. No one asked what this was doing to me. No one asked whether I could carry this any longer. I was no longer a person in their eyes. I was a shield. The next few weeks were unbearable. Every family gathering felt like a performance staged on a fault line. Marcus's wife, sweet, exhausted, glowing with pregnancy, talked about baby names and nursery colors, while Lena smiled tightly and excused herself to the bathroom more often than necessary. I caught my reflection in mirrors and windows and barely recognized myself. I was quieter, edgier. I flinched at my phone buzzing, terrified of what message might come next. Lena started pushing harder. She sent long texts late at night, dissecting every moment of that night years ago, reframing it in ways that made her seem powerless and Marcus predatory. Some of what she said was true, some of it wasn't. When I gently questioned details, she accused me of minimizing her pain. "You thought you were on my side," she wrote once. I stared at that message until my eyes burned. I wanted to scream that there were no sides, that this wasn't a game, that real people would bleed from whatever came next, but I typed back apologies instead. That's how deep the habit of loyalty ran in me, so deep I was still protecting others from the consequences of their own choices. Marcus, meanwhile, grew desperate. He began showing up at my place unannounced, sitting on my couch with his head in his hands, talking about his unborn child, about redemption, about how one mistake shouldn't define a life. He spoke with Lena with a mix of guilt and resentment, painting her as unstable, vindictive, someone who wanted to burn everything down because she was unhappy. And every time he spoke, he added a quiet reminder. If the truth came out, the family would never be the same. Our grandparents' legacy, our parents' relationships, holidays, birthdays, everything would fracture. That was when I finally understood the cruel irony of secrets. They start out as protection, but over time, they become threats. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Lena asked me to meet her again. She didn't waste time on small talk. She slid her phone across the table and showed me a message she'd drafted to Marcus's wife. It was long, detailed, and devastating. It told her about the affair, framed as an ongoing emotional entanglement Marcus had lied about repeatedly. It painted Lena as someone who had been manipulated while she was vulnerable. It omitted her own agency almost entirely. "I haven't sent it yet because I wanted you to see it first." My hands shook as I pushed the phone back to her. I told her I couldn't support this, not like this, not with half-truths that would destroy someone who'd done nothing wrong. Her face hardened instantly. "So you're choosing him," she said. "No," I replied, my voice barely steady. "I'm choosing not to lie anymore." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Then don't expect me to protect you when this blows up." That sentence hit me harder than anything else she'd said. Protect me? From what? From the truth? From blame? In that moment, I saw how far we drifted from the girls who once promised never to lie to each other. Loyalty, for Lena now, meant allegiance no matter the cost, and if I didn't comply, I became collateral damage. I left the cafe knowing the silence was over. It was just a matter of who broke it first. 2 days later, Marcus's wife called me. Her voice was calm, almost eerily so. She asked if we could talk. I considered lying. I considered pretending I didn't know what was coming, but something in her tone told me the truth was already moving, unstoppable. We met at her house while Marcus was at work. She offered me tea, her hands steady despite the storm behind her eyes. She didn't accuse me. She didn't raise her voice. She simply asked, "How long have you known?" That question shattered what was left of me. I told her everything, not to absolve myself, but because I couldn't carry another lie. I told her about the mistake, the silence, the fear, the pressure from both sides. I told her how wrong I'd been to think protecting others justified betraying her trust. When I finished, she sat quietly for a long time, one hand resting on her belly. "I wish you told me sooner," she said at last. There was no anger in her voice, just grief. "But I appreciate that you're telling me now." I cried all the way home, not because I'd lost Marcus or Lena, though I knew I had, but because I finally understood the true cost of my silence. Loyalty had kept me quiet, but honesty was the only thing that gave me back my voice. By the end of that week, everything exploded. Marcus was confronted. Lena sent her message anyway, twisting details further when she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. Family members took sides, accusations flew, my phone rang nonstop, everyone wanting to know why I'd betrayed someone else's trust. No one asked why I'd been put in that position to begin with. In the wreckage, both Marcus and Lena turned on me. To Marcus, I was the cousin who should have protected him at all costs. To Lena, I was the friend who failed the ultimate test of loyalty. And standing there, alone in the fallout, I finally saw the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Loyalty that demands your silence at the expense of your integrity isn't loyalty at all. It's control. There's a moment that comes after the storm, when life doesn't feel dramatic anymore, just honest. That's where I found myself eventually. Not healed in a perfect cinematic way, but grounded, rooted in reality instead of obligation. I woke up one morning and realized I wasn't bracing for impact anymore. My phone buzzing no longer triggered anxiety. Silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. I began to notice how much emotional labor I used to perform without being asked. I was the translator, the buffer, the fixer, the one who absorbed tension so others didn't have to feel it. Losing Lena and Marcus stripped me of those roles, and at first that loss felt like emptiness. But over time it revealed something powerful. I didn't exist to manage other people's consequences. Family dynamics shifted in subtle ways. Some relatives kept their distance, unsure how to engage with me now that I no longer played my old part. Others grew closer, drawn to the honesty I no longer hid. I learned that authenticity acts like a filter. It doesn't make everyone love you, but it ensures the ones who stay are real. One evening, during a quiet family dinner, a younger cousin asked me something unexpected. She said, "How did you know when to stop protecting everyone else?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I told her the truth. I knew when protecting them started costing me my sleep, my self-respect, and my voice, when I felt more loyal to other people's comfort than to my own well-being. Her eyes filled with understanding, and in that moment I realized my story had already begun to matter beyond me. That realization stayed with me. Pain, when processed honestly, doesn't just wound, it teaches. It creates language for experiences people don't know how to name yet. I stopped seeing what I went through as just loss. It became a warning sign, a guidepost, a reminder of what happens when loyalty is allowed to rot into control. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay the early days, the laughter, the closeness, the certainty that Lena and Marcus would always be in my life. I don't push those memories away anymore. I let them come and I let them leave. Loving people who eventually hurt you doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. Staying once you see the truth, that's the part that requires courage. I also reflected deeply on my own accountability. I didn't excuse my silence. I owned it. I understood why I stayed quiet, but I didn't justify it. That balance mattered. Growth doesn't come from self-flagellation or denial. It comes from honest self-examination. I forgave myself not because I was perfect, but because I was willing to change. Marcus and I crossed paths once at a larger family event. We exchanged polite words, nothing more. I saw in his eyes a mixture of regret and resignation. He had learned something too, though differently than I had. Life doesn't give us the same lessons in the same order. I wished him well, silently, and meant it, not because everything was resolved, but because I no longer needed him to understand me for my peace to remain intact. As for Lena, I finally accepted that some people confuse empowerment with absolution. She wanted to feel strong without facing the harm she caused. I wanted truth, even when it implicated me. That difference made reconciliation impossible. And that acceptance, quiet, firm, unarguable, closed the door I'd left cracked open for too long. What stayed with me most was this. Loyalty is not proven by how much pain you can endure in silence. It's proven by how faithfully you align your actions with your values. When loyalty demands you lie, shrink, or disappear, it has already crossed into betrayal of yourself. Today, my life is smaller in some ways, but infinitely more honest. My relationships are fewer, but deeper. I no longer bond through secrets. I bond through truth, and that difference has changed everything. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been forced to choose between belonging and integrity, know this: you are not alone, and you are not wrong for choosing yourself. Sometimes the end of loyalty is not the end of love, but the beginning of self-respect. And that is where my story pauses, not with closure, but with clarity. Freedom is quieter than people expect. There was no moment where I felt triumphant for choosing truth, no instant relief that washed over me once the chaos settled. Instead, there was space, empty, echoing space where relationships used to live. I had mornings where I reached for my phone out of habit, only to remember there was no one left to update, no one waiting on my reassurance or my silence. That emptiness forced me to confront a truth I'd avoided for most of my life. I had built my identity around being needed. In the aftermath, I became hyper-aware of how people treated me. Some family members spoke to me with a careful politeness, as if I were fragile or dangerous. Others acted as though nothing had happened, eager to restore normalcy without acknowledging the damage underneath. I learned quickly who valued honesty and who valued comfort. Those distinctions reshaped my inner circle more drastically than any argument ever could. The hardest part was watching how the narrative continued to shift without me. Marcus told his story to anyone who would listen, positioning himself as a man who'd made a single mistake and paid an unforgivable price. Lena told hers online, vague posts about betrayal, about being silenced, about men who lied and friends who chose blood over truth. In both versions, I existed only as a footnote, a convenient villain or an inconvenient witness. At first, I wanted to correct them, to defend myself, to reclaim my name. But I realized something important. People committed to their own innocence are not looking for clarity. They're looking for validation. So I stayed quiet. Not the old silence rooted in fear, but a new one grounded in boundaries. I told my story only when asked and only in full. I refused to edit the truth to make anyone more comfortable. That decision cost me a few more relationships, but it preserved something far more valuable: my self-respect. One afternoon, months later, Marcus's wife reached out again. She'd given birth to a healthy baby boy, and against all odds, she wanted me to meet him. Holding that child was a moment of profound contradiction. Joy and grief intertwined in a way that made my chest ache. She thanked me once more, not for the pain my honesty caused, but for the agency it gave her. She said, "I can live with the truth. I couldn't live inside the lie." Those words stayed with me. They became a quiet compass whenever doubt crept in. Lena never reached out again. I heard about her life in fragments, new job, new circle of friends, a version of herself untethered from the past. I hoped she found peace, though I knew peace without accountability is often just distraction. As for Marcus, time hardened him. His apologies, when they came, were conditional. He was sorry I felt hurt, sorry things went so far. Never sorry enough to name his betrayal without softening it. I accepted that distance was the only boundary he respected. Through all of this, I learned to redefine loyalty for myself. Loyalty is not blind allegiance. It is not silence in the face of harm. True loyalty is ethical. It protects people's dignity, including your own. It asks hard questions and tolerates discomfort. And sometimes it requires walking away from those you love to stop enabling who they've become. I began sharing parts of my story with others, cautiously at first. Friends, coworkers, strangers who sensed there was something heavy behind my eyes. The response surprised me. People told me about secrets they'd been carrying for years, about being trapped between truth and belonging. I realized how common this kind of betrayal is, how often loyalty is weaponized to keep people quiet. That understanding didn't make my experience easier, but it made it less isolating. Family gatherings slowly resumed, though they were forever changed. Seats shifted, conversations avoided certain names. The absence of Lena and Marcus lingered like an unspoken rule. I learned to exist in that space without trying to fill it. I stopped mediating, stopped smoothing over discomfort. I let people feel what they felt. It wasn't my job anymore to manage everyone else's emotions. There were moments of doubt, of course. Late at night, when loneliness crept in, I wondered if I could have handled things differently, if there was a version of this story where fewer hearts broke. But every time I traced those thoughts to their end, I arrived at the same conclusion. The cost of continued silence would have been my integrity, my mental health, my sense of self. That was a price I was no longer willing to pay. The most unexpected shift came in how I treated myself. For years, I'd been harsh, quick to take blame, eager to absorb guilt that wasn't mine. This experience forced me to practice compassion inwardly. I forgave myself for not knowing better sooner. I forgave myself for being loyal to a fault. I acknowledged that growth often comes from painful awakenings, not perfect choices. Loyalty died in that season of my life, but something stronger was born in its place: discernment. I no longer assume shared history guarantees shared values. I no longer confuse longevity with trustworthiness. And I no longer keep secrets that require me to betray my own conscience. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's this: when loyalty demands that you abandon truth, it's already lost its moral ground. Choosing honesty may cost you people, but it will never cost you yourself. And in the long run, that is the only kind of loyalty worth keeping. Time has a way of revealing what was always there beneath the chaos. As months turned into a year, the sharp edges of betrayal dulled, but the lessons stayed carved into me. I began to notice how often loyalty is praised without being defined, how easily people use it to justify silence, endurance, even self-betrayal. I'd done that for years without realizing it, wearing my loyalty like armor while it quietly weighed me down. I started rebuilding my life in ways that felt unfamiliar, but honest. I made new friends slowly, paying attention not to how long they'd known me, but to how they treated the truth. I learned to listen for consistency between words and actions, for the subtle cues that reveal whether someone values integrity or convenience. It wasn't about distrust. It was about discernment, a skill I'd learned the hard way. Occasionally, someone would ask about Lena or Marcus, curiosity tinged with gossip. I answered carefully, refusing to reduce complex people to villains or saints. I spoke about choices, consequences, and the cost of silence. Some listeners understood, others wanted drama. I learned not to perform my pain for anyone's entertainment. My story was mine to tell, not theirs to consume. Marcus reached out once more, nearly a year after everything collapsed. His message was short, hesitant. He said he'd been thinking a lot, that becoming a father had forced him to confront parts of himself he'd ignored for too long. We met for coffee, two people connected by blood and history, but separated by truth. He apologized, this time without conditions. It didn't erase the past, but it mattered. I told him forgiveness didn't mean access. He nodded, understanding more than he ever had before. We parted without promises, just honesty. That felt like progress. Lena remained a ghost in my life. I'd see her name occasionally on social media through mutual connections, always attached to inspirational quotes about resilience and self-love. For a long time, those posts made my chest tighten. I wondered if she ever thought about me, about the way our friendship ended without resolution. Eventually, I realized closure doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. I accepted that our bond had been real, and so had its ending. The most profound change was internal. I stopped confusing endurance with strength. I stopped believing that being the one who holds everything together is a virtue. Strength, I learned, can look like walking away, like saying no, like letting relationships fail when they're built on dishonesty. That realization reshaped every part of my life, from work to family to love. I began speaking openly about boundaries, something I'd once associated with selfishness. I learned that boundaries are not walls, they're guidelines for how others are allowed to treat you. When I stopped over-explaining them, people showed me who they were. Some respected them, others pushed back. The ones who pushed back revealed exactly why the boundaries were necessary. There were moments of grief that surprised me, surfacing long after I thought I'd healed. A song Lena and I used to love, a childhood memory with Marcus that surfaced during holidays. I let myself feel those moments fully, without letting them rewrite the truth. Grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means something mattered. Through all of this, I discovered a quieter, steadier sense of peace. Not happiness in the loud, celebratory sense, but alignment. My actions matched my values. My words matched my beliefs. I no longer carried secrets that demanded my silence or my shame. That alignment became my anchor. People sometimes ask if I'd do it differently, knowing how much it cost me. I tell them the truth. I wish I'd chosen honesty sooner. I wish I'd trusted that telling the truth is an act of respect, not betrayal. But I don't regret the choice I made when I finally understood what was at stake. Because once loyalty dies, what remains must be something truer, or you lose yourself entirely. This experience taught me that secrets don't just test relationships, they expose them. They reveal who values control over connection, who prioritizes image over integrity. And they force you to decide what kind of person you want to be when no option is painless. I chose to be someone who could live with myself. And in doing so, I learned that the end of certain relationships is not a failure, it's an evolution. A painful one, yes, but also a necessary one. Because the relationships that survive honesty, even when it hurts, are the only ones that deserve to. By the second year, after everything unraveled, the story no longer felt like an open wound. It felt more like a scar, something tender when touched, but no longer bleeding. I carried it with me into new spaces, new conversations, new versions of myself, and I noticed how often people confuse healing with forgetting. I hadn't forgotten, I'd integrated. I began to understand how deeply the idea of loyalty is embedded in families like mine. It's passed down quietly, reinforced through sayings and expectations. Don't air dirty laundry, blood comes first, handle things privately. Those rules are meant to protect families, but they can also trap them. They taught me to endure instead of confront, to absorb pain instead of naming it. Breaking that pattern felt like betrayal to some, but to me, it felt like liberation. At a family gathering that year, someone finally said it out loud. An aunt, older and tired of pretending, looked around the room and said, "We all knew something was wrong. We just didn't want to know." Her honesty cracked something open. Conversations followed, not dramatic, not loud, but real. People admitted their own complicity in the silence, their fear of conflict, their regret. It didn't fix everything, but it shifted the blame from me alone to the system that taught us all to value appearance over truth. That moment gave me a strange sense of peace. It validated what I'd felt all along. This wasn't just my burden to carry. The secret survived because many people benefited from not looking too closely. I started volunteering with a support group that focused on relational trauma. Listening to others' stories, I heard echoes of my own. People caught between loyalty and self-respect, between love and truth. I never positioned myself as an expert. I simply shared what I'd learned, that silence is not neutral, that it always serves someone, and that choosing yourself doesn't make you disloyal, it makes you honest. One evening after a meeting, a woman pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. She said she'd been keeping a secret for her sister for over a decade, one that was slowly destroying her mental health. She said, "I thought loyalty meant protecting her," she said, "but I'm disappearing." I told her something I wish someone had told me sooner. Loyalty that erases you is not love, it's self-abandonment. As my life steadied, I noticed how differently I approached relationships. I asked harder questions early on. I paid attention to how people handled accountability, not just affection. When someone made a mistake, I watched whether they owned it or deflected it. Those patterns mattered more to me than charm or shared history. I wasn't bitter. I was careful. Marcus and I settled into a distant, civil relationship. We spoke occasionally, usual about practical family matters. He respected my boundaries now, perhaps because he finally understood what it cost to cross them. I wished him well, genuinely, but I no longer felt responsible for his redemption. That work belonged to him. Lena remained a closed chapter. I stopped wondering if she'd ever apologize. I stopped imagining conversations that would never happen. I accepted that some people move forward by rewriting the past, and others move forward by facing it. We had chosen different paths, and that was the final truth of our story. The most unexpected outcome of all this was the trust I rebuilt with myself. For years, I'd doubted my instincts, overridden my discomfort to keep the peace. Now, when something felt wrong, I listened. I honored that inner voice. It had been there all along, whispering truths I wasn't ready to hear. There were moments of gratitude that surprised me. Gratitude for clarity, gratitude for resilience, gratitude even for the loss, because it forced me to grow in ways comfort never would have. I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it comes from fear, from people protecting their own image at any cost. Understanding that didn't excuse the harm, but it softened my anger. And I also learned that forgiveness is not a single act. It's a process, one that unfolds unevenly. Some days forgiveness felt natural, other days resentment crept back in. I stopped judging myself for that. Healing is not linear, and expecting it to be only adds another layer of shame. As I look back now, what stands out isn't the drama or the fallout. It's the moment I chose to stop being the keeper of other people's secrets at the expense of my own well-being. That choice changed everything. It redefined loyalty, love, and family for me. If you're listening to this and carrying a secret that's slowly breaking you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not obligated to destroy yourself to protect someone else's comfort. Truth is not cruel. Silence can be. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let loyalty die so honesty can live. There's a moment that comes after the storm, when life doesn't feel dramatic anymore, just honest. That's where I found myself eventually. Not healed in a perfect cinematic way, but grounded, rooted in reality instead of obligation. I woke up one morning and realized I wasn't bracing for impact anymore. My phone buzzing no longer triggered anxiety. Silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. I began to notice how much emotional labor I used to perform without being asked. I was the translator, the buffer, the fixer, the one who absorbed tension so others didn't have to feel it. Losing Lena and Marcus stripped me of those roles, and at first that loss felt like emptiness. But over time, it revealed something powerful. I didn't exist to manage other people's consequences. Family dynamics shifted in subtle ways. Some relatives kept their distance, unsure how to engage with me now that I no longer played my old part. Others grew closer, drawn to the honesty I no longer hid. I learned that authenticity acts like a filter. It doesn't make everyone love you, but it ensures the ones who stay are real. One evening, during a quiet family dinner, a younger cousin asked me something unexpected. She said, "How did you know when to stop protecting everyone else?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I told her the truth. I knew when protecting them started costing me my sleep, my self-respect, and my voice. When I felt more loyal to other people's comfort than to my own well-being. Her eyes filled with understanding, and in that moment, I realized my story had already begun to matter beyond me. That realization stayed with me. Pain, when processed honestly, doesn't just wound, it teaches. It creates language for experiences people don't know how to name yet. I stopped seeing what I went through as just loss. It became a warning sign, a guidepost, a reminder of what happens when loyalty is allowed to rot into control. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay the early days, the laughter, the closeness, the certainty that Lena and Marcus would always be in my life. I don't push those memories away anymore. I let them come, and I let them leave. Loving people who eventually hurt you doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. Staying once you see the truth, that's the part that requires courage. I also reflected deeply on my own accountability. I didn't excuse my silence. I owned it. I understood why I stayed quiet, but I didn't justify it. That balance mattered. Growth doesn't come from self-flagellation or denial. It comes from honest self-examination. I forgave myself not because I was perfect, but because I was willing to change. Marcus and I crossed paths once at a larger family event. We exchanged polite words, nothing more. I saw in his eyes a mixture of regret and resignation. He had learned something too, though differently than I had. Life doesn't give us the same lessons in the same order. I wished him well silently and meant it. Not because everything was resolved, but because I no longer needed him to understand me for my peace to remain intact. As for Lena, I finally accepted that some people confuse empowerment with absolution. She wanted to feel strong without facing the harm she caused. I wanted truth, even when it implicated me. That difference made reconciliation impossible. And that acceptance, quiet, firm, unarguable, closed the door I'd left cracked open for too long. What stayed with me most was this: loyalty is not proven by how much pain you can endure in silence. It's proven by how faithfully you align your actions with your values. When loyalty demands you lie, shrink, or disappear, it has already crossed into betrayal of yourself. Today, my life is smaller in some ways, but infinitely more honest. My relationships are fewer but deeper. I no longer bond through secrets, I bond through truth, and that difference has changed everything. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been forced to choose between belonging and integrity, know this: you are not alone, and you are not wrong for choosing yourself. Sometimes the end of loyalty is not the end of love, but the beginning of self-respect. And that is where my story pauses, not with closure, but with clarity. By the time I realized the story had reached its end, nothing around me had dramatically changed. No doors slammed, no apologies arrived late in the night. Life simply continued, steady, ordinary, and honest. And that's how I knew I'd crossed into something real, the kind of closure that doesn't announce itself, but settles quietly into your bones. I no longer introduced myself through the roles I used to play. I wasn't the fixer, the keeper, the loyal one who could be counted on to absorb the damage. I was just myself, a person who had learned, painfully and deliberately, where responsibility ends and self-betrayal begins. That distinction reshaped every choice I made afterward. There came a moment, small but significant, when I truly understood how far I'd come. I was invited into a difficult conversation, one of those familiar setups where someone hints at a secret, tests the water, looks for an accomplice in silence. I listened, felt the old reflex stir, and then calmly said, "I can't carry that for you." The relief on my own face surprised me. Setting that boundary felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. What I learned from that moment is this: growth isn't loud. It's the quiet refusal to repeat old patterns. Family eventually found a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in ways it had never been before. We spoke more carefully. We avoided pretending. Some relationships healed. Others remained distant, and I let them. Not every bond is meant to survive truth, and that doesn't make truth the villain. I watched Marcus from afar as he learned how to be a father in the middle of loss. I hoped he became gentler, more accountable for his child's sake. I didn't need proof of his growth anymore. My peace no longer depended on other people's transformation. That was another lesson loyalty never taught me. Lena crossed my mind less and less until one day I realized weeks had passed without her name surfacing in my thoughts. Not because I'd erased her, but because she no longer occupied the center of my emotional world. She was a chapter, important, formative, but finished, and that was enough. What surprised me most was how my body responded to honesty. I slept better, my shoulders stopped carrying tension I didn't know was there. I laughed more freely without scanning rooms for discomfort I needed to manage. The physical relief told me something my mind took longer to accept. Living truthfully is not just a moral choice, it's a physiological one. Over time, people began to trust me differently, not as a vault, not as a shield, but as someone safe because I was honest. That trust felt cleaner, lighter. It wasn't built on secrets or shared guilt. It was built on mutual respect, and I guarded it carefully. Looking back, I understand now that the shared secret was never the real bond. Fear was. Fear of conflict, fear of loss, fear of being alone. Once fear was removed, the relationships collapsed because there was nothing else holding them together. That realization hurt, but it also freed me from romanticizing what was never sustainable. If I could speak to the person I was at the beginning of this story, I wouldn't scold her. I would thank her for surviving the best way she knew how. Then I would tell her what I know now. Loyalty is not a test of endurance. Love is not proven through silence. And protecting the truth is not betrayal. It's respect. The end of loyalty in my life was not the end of care. It was the end of fear-based attachment. It was the moment I stopped confusing proximity with safety and history with integrity. From that ending came something steadier than loyalty ever was: self-trust. I trust myself now to walk away when something feels wrong, to speak when silence becomes harmful, to love without losing myself in the process. That trust is the quiet inheritance I carry forward from everything I lost. This story doesn't end with reconciliation or reunion. It ends with alignment, with a life no longer shaped around keeping others comfortable at my expense, with the understanding that some people are meant to walk with you for a season, not a lifetime. And if you're listening to this, holding a secret that's slowly hollowing you out, hear me clearly. You don't owe anyone your disappearance. Loyalty that asked you to vanish is already dead. Let it go. What grows in its place might save your life. That is how my story closes. Not with bitterness, not with regret, but with truth, finally spoken, fully owned, and gently carried forward.